Hey everyone, today I want to talk about the settings that I use when I play and speedrun Forspoken, specifically for Ultimate Mode speedruns. So this is the gameplay balance or difficulty settings, and many of these settings are locked on Ultimate Mode. They're not able to be changed. This is to make it so that the challenge of Ultimate Mode is not negated through changing how much damage you receive or turning auto evasion on or something like that. There are a few settings that you can change here. The first one is aim assist, and I actually personally have aim assist off, and the reason for this is so that I can manually place my burst shots. If I manually aim on the ground, like right behind an enemy for example, I can get critical hits. I can also knock enemies into other groups of enemies, so that subsequent burst shots may hit multiple enemies at the same time. For this reason, I have aim assist off because it interferes with this strategy, and I would recommend turning it off. The other setting that you can change on the difficulty settings is automatic support spell switching. This will change to a different support spell that is not currently in cooldown after using a support spell. This setting is kind of up to you, but I actually still personally have this one off as well. I prefer the manual control, and by having a support spell that is currently in cooldown as your active support spell and then doing a parkour attack, you can reduce that support spell's cooldown. So I like the amount of manual control, so I don't know. It's just kind of personal preference though. It's also worth mentioning that on this screen there is an exploit. None of the grayed out settings are supposed to be able to be changed, but there is one little oversight. If you hold triangle on the screen to restore everything to default, it changes the grayed out settings to the normal difficulty defaults, and this means that one of the settings gets changed, which is the spell switching slowdown. Basically what this means is that by using this exploit, by holding triangle, you can make it so that the game does not run at full speed when you are selecting your support and attack spells. However, for speedrunning this is practically irrelevant or almost a negative effect that you don't even want. So this exploit does not amount to anything, but I thought I would bring it up anyway because it's kind of amusing. The next page is the controls. Confirm, X, that's just default. Left right stick input dead zone. Alright, so this one, the default is 0.1. I set mine to 0.05. It doesn't matter too much. There's only kind of one spot where it matters, which is that on the magic tree menu, when you're swapping between like Scylla and Phrase magic trees for example, it uses the right control stick, and the minimum input will change which screen you're on. So I think the dead zone is probably most relevant for that, but I don't think this setting matters too much. Just make sure your controller is okay, and you should be good. Camera settings. You can invert the camera if you want, that's personal preference. Rotation speed, I have mine at 0.9. This allows me to have a little bit more accuracy when aiming, but it comes with a trade-off. The trade-off is that my maximum rotation speed is a bit slower. If you feel really confident with your aiming, you could turn it up to something higher. It is a trade-off. I guess I'd recommend keeping it at 1 and then seeing how it feels, and if you feel like you want a bit more accuracy, then lower it, and if you want faster camera turning, then increase it. The game also provides a custom camera rotation setting, which allows you to change the acceleration and also the stick response curve. I tried experimenting with these, but I found it to actually kind of feel worse than the dummy setting, like the dummy rotation speed. So I actually just don't even use these custom settings. It's kind of neat that the developers were including more advanced options here, but I kind of just like the way the regular camera feels without this custom rotation stuff. Automatic camera adjustment. This is like if the camera turns as you're turning. I just set this to the defaults during parkour only. It doesn't matter too much, it's up to you, whatever feels right. Camera shake barely matters, it's up to you. I do have my controller vibration on. I can't tell you how much that helps or hurts or doesn't matter. It may be an irrelevant factor. And then the trigger effect intensity. So this is like the PS5 haptic feedback on the shoulder buttons where like it suddenly gains resistance at a certain threshold and things like that. I feel like this setting, like the haptic feedback on the PS5 controller, I feel like it's somewhat of a gimmick and doesn't really aid the gameplay. And I just turned it off. I actually prefer to not feel that resistance when I'm using the shoulder buttons, which you do a lot. You do use the shoulder buttons a lot in this game for magic, so I don't know. I just don't think it has value personally. You can set it to like low or high, whatever, but another thing too is I'm playing this on a DualSense Edge, and one of the features of the DualSense Edge is to reduce how far you have to press to get a shoulder press. I set mine to the shortest length, and so when you do that, it automatically disables the haptics anyway. So I couldn't even use it anyway. But yeah, I just think it's not necessary, so I just say turn it off. Up to you though. Text and voice language settings. So this, it's up to you. There may be very slight time variation with the start of chapter 10. There's like a little bit of back and forth Frey and Cuff dialogue before you're allowed to enter the archive. Last I tested this, I think English was faster, but I don't think I have a comprehensive test of this. But I think it's a very minute difference, and it doesn't really matter. So I'd say this is pretty much personal preference. Display settings, I would absolutely recommend performance focused, as this gives you a higher frame rate, and that feels much, much better. So yeah, just definitely use performance focused. I find the base game to be a little bit dark, so I turn up the brightness and reduce the gamma a touch. 1.2 and 0.9. In my opinion, this looks better than 1.0 and 1.0. So this kind of brightens up the game, and in my opinion makes it look better. 120 Hz display mode. I don't have a 120 Hz monitor. I can't tell you what that's like. So that's not accessible to me. Motion blur. I think this is kind of personal preference, but I was a little bit paranoid that having motion blur on might make it so that pausing the game to like skip cutscenes and stuff, I had like a paranoia that maybe it was slowing me down by having it on. I don't actually know. Maybe it doesn't matter. I just have it off, just it's a bit of a paranoia. And then they have these like grayscale filter and then colorblind filters here, which I recommend just turning that off unless you're colorblind. For the sound, you can have it so that Cuff's voice comes in through the controller speaker. I find this kind of irritating, so I turned it off. And for volume, I have everything at 100%. While I'm recording this, I have music at only 30%, so it doesn't take up too much of the sound when you're listening to me explaining this. But when I'm playing the game, I turn this to 100%. Wireless controller settings. So this is the control customization screen, and I actually don't change a single thing. I use default controls the entire way. I don't change anything. You could change the stuff, but I just leave it as it is, and I think it feels fine. Alright, the last screen here is the accessibility settings, which has a lot of settings, and there are some interesting ones on this screen. So the first one is automatic item gathering. This is actually really important. Turn it on for sure. It makes it so you just pick up everything as you run past it. instead of needing to manually press to pick up the item. And it matters because you're running at a very fast speed, and if you were to turn this off, you would need to mash the button extremely fast, and it would kind of feel frustrating. And so yeah, just turn this on, it's really good. Automatic lockpicking is not relevant to the speedrun at all. So I just have it off because I liked to do puzzles when I was playing casually, but it really doesn't make a difference for the actual speedrun. Item visibility. You could turn this to enhanced to get a bit better clarity on where items are, and I would maybe say that's a reasonable thing to do, but I just have mine as on. You can also turn it off, but that makes items extremely hard to see, so I don't recommend that. Map icon size, I just have mine on standard. You could use large if you want. This one highlights nearby characters. This one does help visibility in certain sequences, such as when Sepal is getting attacked by break zombies. Also when you're fighting like gators in chapter 12. So you could turn this on, but I find the effect to be like kind of immersion breaking because it like makes nearby enemies like they're just like gray, like light gray, and it looks kind of weird. I just don't like the way it looks. So I personally have this off. You can kind of mitigate the lack of visibility by using cuff scan, at least in the Corruption Encroaches fight. And I don't know, this is personal preference. If you have trouble seeing enemies in some of the fights, I'd say just turn it on. But for me, I think I don't like the way it looks, so I just turn it off. Settings for Tantus Familiars allows the cat summon to exist, which is not relevant to the speedrun because you don't collect one of the familiars. So I just have this on. This one, spell switching menu display, you can have it so that you have to toggle the menu, which means pressing the button twice to turn it on and off. Or you can have it so you have the menu up while it's being held. I prefer hold, so I have it on hold. Magic parkour sprinting. So this one, I haven't gone through the whole game with this on toggle. I always play default, but needing to hold the button down means that you may need to use a claw grip. In my case, I have a DualSense Edge, so the back button is very useful for using flow or magic parkour. But if you want camera control on a regular DualSense, and you don't want to claw grip the controller, then maybe you could try turning this to toggle, and that might actually work. But again, I haven't gone through the whole game with this or anything, so I don't know if there's any downside to having it on toggle. This one, leaps/soar controls, this one is also interesting. There's this semi-auto setting, which will allow you to leap as soon as possible when you're pressed up against a wall. This would save a little bit of time because you wouldn't need to manually press the button. However, it also means if you get caught up on a wall and you're holding towards the wall, you may accidentally leap off of it. I've been playing with it off, aka on the default setting, but it may have a little advantage. It's a debatable setting for sure. Semi-auto should be more optimal in theory because it should cut some frames off the leap off the wall. But yeah, it's a minor difference. I suppose it's worth experimenting with. Sprint button. The only thing this does is that it allows you to sprint in Sepal using the circle button instead of having to click in L3. Just leave it as the default setting here. Actually, is this the default setting? Both? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'd say just leave it to this, don't change it. Immunity to own magic. Okay, this one, it's interesting that this setting even exists. What it does is it allows you to use burst shot and prime, for example, when you're you can use it at close range. If you turn this off, which is actually the default setting, the default setting is having this off, and when it's off, you take this like stagger recoil animation when you use burst shot too close. So it's actually advantageous to turn this on. It's not locked by the ultimate mode settings lockout, so like it's allowed to do. You're allowed to change this. And I would say you should change it, just turn it on. But it's kind of weird that it's even here. It kind of feels like the devs created these recoil animations and they like wanted it. They wanted you to not use certain attacks at close range, but you can just literally disable it through this setting. It's kind of weird. I think maybe the game devs are giving a little bit too many settings. I don't know. Either way, it's useful to turn it on, but it does remove that stagger element from burst shot and prime and stuff, so kind of an odd one. Focus on target. This one is interesting as well. So normally when you have an attack spell charged, you cannot lock on to an enemy, which is almost a little bit frustrating. It's like, why can't I lock on? Well, an attack spell is charged. This is unintuitive. So you could turn it off, which then does allow you to lock onto an enemy with an attack charged, but it has a downside because this focus on target mechanic, what it actually means is that when an attack spell is charged, when you press R3, instead of locking on and then like it kind of slowly turns the camera to the enemy, it instead instantly snaps the camera to the enemy, which is like much faster than manually turning your camera. It is actually, in my opinion, useful to have this on, even though you can't lock on to enemies and it takes some getting used to with attack magic charged. Just being able to do this instant camera snap or like fast camera rotation using this mechanic is useful in my opinion. So I actually recommend having this on, even though it's like a little bit unintuitive. But it's up to you, I suppose. Temporary lock-on when attacking. So this one will make it so that when you attack any enemy, it automatically locks onto that enemy. This is unplayable in my opinion. Like, don't turn this on. Turn this off, because if you turn it on, you're gonna lose a lot of control, and I think it's a bad setting. Don't turn it on. Lock on to nearby enemies. Oh yeah, so this one is where if you have an enemy locked on and then you defeat that enemy, this will automatically lock on to the next enemy that is nearby. I haven't really experimented with this much. I currently just play with it off. I would probably recommend playing with it off. It seems like it's maybe taking control away. So I would say don't use it. Off-screen enemy lock-on. All this does is it enables R3 to lock on to enemies that are off-screen. And in my opinion, that is a benefit. I definitely would recommend having it on. And then this setting, press to switch spells. This allows you to just tap R1 or L1 to kind of rotate around your wheel of spells. And I think that's useful. And so I recommend having it on. Alright, cuff settings, cuff compass visibility. It doesn't matter. These settings don't really matter. Cuff chat frequency. So this one, it doesn't matter for the speedrun. If you turn it to minimal, you won't get a lot of repetitious dialogue. The most egregious is when you use cuff scan. And then cuff makes like the same remarks. And as you want to kind of continuously be using cuff scan as you're playing casually because you want to find all the items that are nearby, you're going to hear a lot of repetitious dialogue. Even if you set this to low, you're still going to hear that dialogue. So it's a little bit irritating. So if you want to turn it to minimal, that could be a reasonable thing to do. However, you're going to miss out on some other dialogue. So when I do runs, I actually set this to default just to get the richness of all the different dialogue. So I don't know, it's up to you. I think there was a bit of an oversight, honestly, because I think cuff scanning should not make dialogue play so frequently. Like, even if you have this on low, you hear the same cuff scan dialogue over and over. And so, in my opinion, there was just like a mistake made in how often some of the dialogue plays. But yeah, I have it on default because you do get to hear different voice lines and things. HUD size, it's up to you. I have it on medium. HUD position, you can move the HUD further into the corner, which, I mean, at first thought it might seem like a good idea, because then more of the center of the screen is just the game. However, it's useful to look at your HUD, and so by bringing the HUD closer to the center of the screen instead of having it all the way off in the corner, your eye doesn't have to move as far into the corner. So in my opinion, having it on default is good. Hide HUD, this hides the HUD entirely. I very much do not recommend this. In fact, it's broken. If you set hide HUD to be on, then you cannot even interact with your spell menu, which means you're locked into the current spells that you have and you can't change it. So turn this off. Battle ranking info display. So if you're not playing on ultimate mode, then I understand turning this to basic or none, but on ultimate mode, your grade is a significant factor in how much damage you're doing in battles, and all the details of how all of that grade building works is, in my opinion, valuable. So I would recommend turning this to full. Spellcraft challenge display will give you your current progress on completing spellcraft challenges. I have this on so that I can see how many more things I need to do to complete the current spellcraft challenges. Attack hint display. So you can turn this off, on, or enhanced visibility. I actually turn on enhanced visibility for this. This will make it so like the purple piercing warning and the red unblockable warning is simply larger and taking up more of the screen. Really, like, being able to see when a piercing attack is coming is very important. It could be the difference between getting destroyed by a break zombie doing a piercing attack on you and then losing all your grade. So the more enhanced warning you have, the better. This just kind of makes it a little bit more visible on the screen so you can see it more easily. Remember last viewed menu section. Now I haven't gone through the game with this off, so I'm not really sure how this affects the menuing, but I just have it on. Maybe it's something to mess with, but I've never tried going through the game with this off, so I guess I'm kind of curious about it, but I just have it on. Subtitles, it's up to you. And finally, the units of measurements, metric or imperial. I use metric because it's kind of more proper, I suppose, but the imperial units, you get feet instead of meters, which are more granular, so if you want more granularity, then feet could be more valuable than meters. And with that, those are all the settings that I use and how they affect the game. Yep, so that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching this video, I hope it was informative. And that's all for now, so I'll see you around.